Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ken.
It's good to
Good
see
evening,
everyone. We
Ken.
have Ken with us and Dr. Ricks as always. I want to welcome everyone. First of all, happy Sabbath, everybody. It's Sabbath here. It may not be where you're at, but it sure is here. Episode 419 Problem with One Sided Advice and Propaganda, the Spiritual Perspective. And Dr. Ricks, if you would start us out, that would be great.
Yes. A DFW worker was complaining to the foreman. He says, everyone else on the crew has a shovel. I don't have a shovel. The foreman says, what are you worried about? You don't have a shovel, you can't dig. He says, yeah, but if I don't have a shovel, I don't have anything to lean on like everybody else.
That's the truth.
Doesn't that fit our modern day
Oh,
work
yeah.
ethic? Yeah. Uh, Two really bad dudes in this town. One of them dies, they're brothers. So the surviving brother, goes to a local pastor and says, I want a big, beautiful funeral for my brother, and I'll pay a nice big price. That perks up the pastor's ears. He says, now, but one thing you have to do. He says, what is it? What is it? In your sermon, you've got to say he's a saint. But the pastor says, but everybody knows he's a. Even still, you got to preach this man sainthood. Well, I want the money, I'll take it. So the minister gets going, it's a funeral, large crowd. He starts speaking. He mentions the brothers. He says, this guy was a real bum. I mean, he was a rascal of the first kind. But one good thing I can say for him, compared to his brother, he's a real saint. Okay, how does the ocean say hi? It waves. One more groaner. Why did the teddy bear say no to the dessert? Because the bear was stuffed. Okay, we got a couple of funny ones, but we'll save those for later, maybe. Maybe. Okay, now we would like to start the program off. The problem with one-sided advice and propaganda, the spiritual perspective. And the question I want to ask is, when you look at the world, all the wars and killings and there's all the bad things that happened. World War I, they were all saying that they were too progressive and modern and educated to go back to war. It turned to be one of the most grisly wars. It started a lot of bad things like concentration camps, genocide, poison gas, weapons of mass destruction, carpet bombing of cities. All that's World War I. So you say to yourself, there must be a spiritual component to all the bad things that happen to people. Don't you think?
You could definitely make that argument. Yep.
Because isn't it hard to say that this is just normal human mischief? When you look at the scope of some of the things that have happened, just in the last 100
Oh, yeah.
years or
Yep.
so.
Yep. Yep. You can see it now. It seems to be really. I'm sure they thought the same thing when Hitler came to power, but Hitler was a one off. The whole world seems to be coming into the same kind of attitude, though, right now. It's not just a country, it's global now.
One thing I find interesting, everybody is all up about slavery and concentration camps and working conditions for children. Yet China, a superpower, has millions of people in concentration camps, slave labor, youth labor, and ethnic cleansing. And the world is going to China to celebrate the Winter Olympics. It's almost as if the world doesn't care if there's money to be made. Am I over exaggerating it?
No, no, that's why they like war. There's a lot of money to be made in war.
It's weird. You would think they'd be screaming I know we pulled back some of our diplomats going to China. I know the Chinese are crying deeply over that, but
Oh, the Chinese pay Biden more than we do. He ain't gonna do anything to upset them.
at least he has in the past, that's for sure, through his what they call them, the Biden family enterprise. One thing, if you look at Daniel 10:20, you'll see that the spirit beings control two of the great empires of the day. And it's almost as if that wasn't what Daniel was talking about, but it was just revealed to us on the side when the angel came, had to fight his way through the demons of the Persian Empire to give him the message. And you realize that demons run these great empires. That means demons run a lot of this world. And most, by the way, would you agree that most progressives don't believe in God or
Correct.
the devil?
Correct.
So if you told them there was demonic stuff going on, they'd laugh
Oh
even
yeah,
more, right?
you're crazy. You're tinfoil hat. You're a Bible thumper. I mean, they insult you because they don't have any content, but they will insult you. They have nothing to offer.
And the one thing, as we beat the drums of war, go to war in Ukraine, which is scary, what could happen. You think of Russian troops. You ought to look at some films of the Germans and Russians fighting around Ukraine in the winter of World War II. It is unbelievable how horrible it was. And you end up feeling sorry for the German soldiers. I mean, it was, anyway, you imagine Americans involved in that kind of thing? But my point is, when pros and cons of both sides are not heard equally by the public and by the leaders, bad decisions can be made,
Yep.
right? I want to look at one of the more upsetting things in the Bible. It upsets a lot of commentaries you read about it, what I call spiritual influences on politics. Now, this involves one of the bad kings of Israel who was already on God's bad list because of his wife Jezebel and how they brought in Baal worship and sacrificing babies and all that. But how he was contemplating going to war. The nation is now Syria. It was called something different then, over some territory. And the kind of advice he got in going to war. Would you like to read 1 Kings 22?
Sure.
Please, Ken.
And the Lord said, "Who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall?" Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will entice him." And the Lord said to him, "By what means?" And he said, "I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And he said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go forth and do so. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets."
Now let's switch to modern day. Will the pundits, they're kind of like the modern day prophets. And there are some are religious leaders, but most are media leaders and academic leaders and Hollywood leaders. If the pundits all start saying, go to war, we can't let them violate Ukraine's border, even though our border is being violated by probably 3 to 4 million people when the true numbers are known, and more on their way. It's escalating every day. Can you see how bad decisions can be made when the pundits all start saying one thing?
Yep, absolutely. And I'm really sick and tired, and I was on Twitter tweeting this. Evidently, a whole lot of people liked it. But they, stop calling them immigrants. They're not monarch butterflies. They're not migrating. They're here. They are invading illegal aliens. That's what they are. Call them that. Don't let people get away with changing the language to being undocumented or citizens or any of that trash. They're here. They're illegal, and they don't belong here. There's right ways to come into this country, and that ain't it.
That's interesting. And by the way, when we talk about lying media and pundits and the people being blinded by one-sided advice, have you noticed that the mainstream media will not give that story any coverage? The only time they mention it is when they look like the guy with the horse used his reins to beat some Haitians. Do you remember? Anybody remember that photo? That's the only time the mainstream media even mentioned the border.
They don't want to talk about it.
And in a way,
complicit. The media is complicit with everything that's going on. And you were talking just a minute ago about the pundits. What if they start calling for America to jump in war with Russia? And protect Ukraine. Well, they already have. I've seen several reports on some of the liberal news medias, and there are people that's coming on there saying that we should be protecting their borders, just like you were talking about. So it's starting to happen, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't, because Biden can prove that he can't make a stand and stick with it, or he has already proven that. So I think that's where we're headed at this point in time.
Of the big ones, the big three on what I call media censorship in America, there's big tech, mainstream media and their biases, and Hollywood and entertainment biases, which also includes sports media for the most part. Which of those do you think are worse, Ken?
Well, I don't know if you could put a worse. The major news outlets the major propaganda outlets that masquerade as news, the three networks and then the cable networks. I mean, they're all pretty much crooked, and they it's funny because they are in large part responsible for the disaster in this country. Then they report on the disaster that they helped create, and then they sell advertisement to pay for the disaster they created and to get you to buy stuff. I mean, it's a sick circle.
Yeah, I think the mainstream media it's what they don't say, but also stuff they do say. I think they have people. I got to be careful how I word this. I'm not saying that COVID-19 is not serious, but I get the feeling they make people unafraid more than they need to, especially young, healthy people.
Unafraid.
I mean, afraid more than they need to, young and healthy people. But also, they skew facts that people should know that they don't know. And they don't, I just feel that they have muffed that whole thing completely as far as trusting what can,
well,
you don't know who to
I'm
trust.
on this stuff a lot, and they are failing. People are stop listening to them. When they put a story on, the new variant, the new this, almost universally, the people that comment on it are mocking the news media. They're mocking the TV station or the newspaper or whatever the source is. They mock them. They laugh at them, and they say, "Well, what's the latest scare?" They'll come out with anything. They've had it. The population as a whole, as a majority, has had it. They're fed up with it. Just look at the truckers going across Canada. Thousands of them. It's crazy that the people have just had it. They're done. Not all, but a large part of
Just
them.
Just some of the things about, like they overplayed some of the police mistakes a summer and a half ago. They overplayed them, gave them much too much publicity, and they made it seem like, we said 1, 2 of them cases, they're burning buildings behind them. This is just a mild protest, or it's okay. Who said that protests have to be nice and gentle? They gave a green light to burning, looting, and rioting, and
mostly peaceful. Mostly
so now what
peaceful,
we're finding,
as the flames are shooting up from the Wendy's.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like on what was it, January 6th, when they cut the so-called insurrection happened. I went into work the next day, and there was a guy there, and he was obviously a liberal, and he says, "Well, what'd you think about what happened yesterday?" I said, "It's a mostly peaceful protest." And he looked at me in dismay. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's mostly peaceful. I've been hearing that all summer. This was a peaceful protest." So he couldn't say nothing to that.
Yeah, and they didn't burn the building down.
Right. So.
Also, I do
Going
think
right back
big
into
tech
face.
censorship is bad. I've heard all kinds of stories of doctors who had positive medical things to say about something like palliatives the government didn't want people to take. And big tech, if you even mentioned it, you were censored. Like, I think it's Dan Bongino, we'll get his name right, said something about that, and he got permanently banned from Twitter, I think, and YouTube. And anybody who quotes him on what he
Yeah.
said, they get banned. Can you see?
Well, full
That's horrible
disclosure, he's been
censorship.
begging them to ban him for the last 8 months. I dare you. I dare. He don't care. He don't need him.
Yeah.
He's got his own outlet, and he don't care. He's got a podcast that's hugely successful. He's on the radio. He's got Rumble that he started and a few other things. He don't need them, and he don't care. He says, I got plenty of money. Ban me. If you ban me, it'll make me strong. And they finally just did it.
But the problem with that is, since most young people go to those places on their smartphone, they only hear one-sided arguments. And those people change their mind 7 months later. Now it's okay to say that it started in the lab. A year ago, they banned you for saying that. Now the truth is out and they can't totally deny it. But that one-sided censorship is terrible. Would you go to the next scripture, 1 Kings 22:13?
And the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, Behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably.
And that's what worries me. We only hear from the media and big tech and what's on your smartphones, one side. And that's really dangerous to only hear one side of an argument. Or one side is vastly overemphasized. And they marginalize the few people who dare say anything otherwise. And that's like being partially blind going into a fight. I can't see my right side, or whatever side they don't want you to see. I can't see that side because they have, and that is what we're facing, unsound advice and propaganda. And doesn't it make you suspicious? There's an evil influence because we assume God allowed demons to do it, to blind all the prophets that were advising this king, except for the one. He didn't want to believe the one, as it turned, the only one that told him the truth. He was going to die in that battle, but he didn't want to believe it. But it's a great story, but you realize that if you are bad, sometimes God will allow the demonic world to deceive you. I mean, isn't that the only way you can interpret that scripture?
Pretty much, yeah.
Now you could argue those people didn't want to hear from the true God. They're all Baal worshipers, and they didn't care about the truth. Yes, that's true, but God still blinded them even more than they would have been otherwise. Like Pharaoh was bad. So I think sometimes we have to be careful. If we're bad, God will allow us to go listen to
Yeah, he
only bad advice.
cemented them in their deception. Basically, he's steadfast in their deception, means you can't deal with them. Someone like us you can't deal with them, you can't talk to them, you can't reason with them. The narrative is the narrative is the narrative, and they're just you're not going to drag them out of it, just like someone who is caught up in Catholicism or anything like that. Beware that they try to use that argument on you. We didn't start here. Most of us, we started elsewhere and ended up here, and because we've seen the rest of it. Right. It's not like this is the only thing we know, and we've seen it. We've seen the other side, and we were allowed to see and chose this side.
Yeah, if somebody asked me, well, do you understand what the mainstream Protestant arguments are or Catholic arguments? I've had several courses in comparative religion. I think I understand it pretty well. I mean, maybe some variations here and there. I think I understand it pretty well. And I know their arguments, and some are clever. By the way, clever arguments don't mean it's true. By the way, do you know that lawyers are taught, and I guess others as well, debate teams, to debate both sides of the argument very well. Doesn't matter which side is true, it's irrelevant. Depends on who's paying you.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I listened to the Baptist preacher a few times when I went to a Baptist church. One of the things that always turned me away from any church was, Jesus is so kind and loving, and he's such a merciful man. But if you don't repent, you don't go to heaven. You're going to burn in hell forever and ever. And I always thought, what kind of God would do that to anybody? So that's when I really started paying attention a little bit more to truth, and doing my own studies into it, and learning. It took a few years, but I just said, I can't believe this. That's the way they believe, and they do believe that way.
And some of them believe that if the missionary doesn't get there, everybody, which in places like China and India, is children and millions, actually billions of people, are going to be tortured forever and ever. The missionary didn't get there in time. You realize how logic that would make God but the premise behind that make God a sadist.
Exactly. Well, Linda rearranging the furniture tonight over there, Ken?
No, she was putting the vlog on the fire. It's cold down here. She didn't warn me she was doing that. I would have muted my mic. Sorry about that. Right. But I'm laughing at my Tampa friends down there who's saying, come on down. It's going to be warm down here. Wait till tomorrow. They're going to be cold.
Let me ask you this question. I'll start with Ken Esther, because this is a question that's maybe hard to say. Do you think most people are aware that a lot of truth is being canceled online and ignored by the mainstream media?
Well, there's no doubt about it. It started from day one, and they've been doing this for the last year. Well, ever since I even watched media, they will come up with a story, and there's obviously lies there, and so something drives that lie. And if people were open and honest, which even I'm sad to say that even some of the conservative news stations they're people that do not tell the truth. And it's a sad state of affairs when people believe this stuff and they take it in hook, line, and sinker, and they don't really rationalize or logically think things through. We have a lot of things in Atlanta that's going on. A 6-month baby got shot by a drive-by shooter this past week, and you wonder where the logic is, and the way they report it is almost glorified. And I'm thinking that's a horrible thing. Think about what that mother has to do. And, it's obviously in a poor part of town, but still, they don't sympathize with people like that. They try to, but they just, I guess the Eagles had that song, I forgot the name of the song, but it had a lyric in it, the bubble-headed bleach blonde tell about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. And, that's just the way it is. And so people need to really focus and get through all that and make their own decisions about what's going on around them.
Yeah, that's so true. I even heard someone complaining about some particular crime wave, and they put the blame on the guns and not, or the SUV, and the media did, and not the guy behind the gun.
They have a rule: never, ever, ever upset the narrative. So if you got to say this guy intentionally ran these kids over, you got to say it was the SUV that did it, a runaway SUV, or they called it an accident, they called it a crash, they called it anything but this domestic terrorist, which this guy actually was, but because he wasn't white, we cannot put that narrative out. They won't break that cycle. They refuse.
Well, this one bothers me too. I heard a rabbi discussing it. The media dropped the story, but you remember 2 weeks ago, almost, when an Islamic guy he's originally from Pakistan, as folks said, but he's but he's a British citizen. And a known terrorist in Britain. He's on their terrorist watch list with problems. He legally came to America as a tourist, and when he threatened the synagogue and the rabbi, the FBI said, "We have no idea what his motivation was." And the media went along with it for about a day. My lower jaw, like.
Remember, was it Trayvon Martin? The guy who shot him was a white Hispanic. He couldn't just be a Mexican guy or a Hispanic guy. He had to be a white Hispanic. What's a white Hispanic? I ain't never seen one of those. You either are or you aren't. And remember, they had to say he was a white. Couldn't say the Hispanic guy shot the black guy. They had to say it was a white Hispanic guy. See, they will not ever deviate from the narrative, which means they lie. They have to lie.
They have to lie. That's
and our
exactly
FBI
right.
and the media. Now, enough people complained about it. It turns out he was in that town to release a high-profile Islamic terrorist prisoner he was demanding. That in itself told you what his purpose was. And he was in the same town where the prison is or close by. Any idiot, that's so... And the question is, why did our government not check with the British about his record and not allow him into the country? They were too busy funneling illegal aliens here in the middle of the night to be working on their immigration details.
There's got to be a spiritual component when an entire industry in lockstep will climb a tree to tell you a lie when they can tell you the truth standing on the ground. There's got to be a spiritual component to that. It's why would everybody in lockstep support the same lie over and over and over? Not even once do they slip up hardly and tell you the truth. They just can't do it. It's not in them.
There's obviously a spiritual influence on a lot of. I know the media is mostly in New York and D.C., and you better believe the demons there are working hard on them, influencing them as best they can.
Where you wait to get on the subway. I mean, people got to be demon possessed to shove people into the path of a subway train. I mean, it's got to. Remember what was that? Well, one of the Ghostbusters movie when New York became demon possessed and everybody was it's just like it's what it is. It's what it is.
Except those were cute little blue things that look like chewing gum. These real demons are very mean-spirited.
I mean, that's what we're dealing with.
But that's just it, though. If you look at this country, we were blessed for many, many years, and now our country is pretty much turned its back on God, and we can see the results. Those of us that have opened their minds, and some others that may not know exactly what they're seeing, but we can see the results of God just taking away His blessings from us, and these are the kind of things that we're going to see. The demons that are allowed to run rampant through our government, or allowed governments, I should say, throughout the country. We're allowing people to come in and take over our country. The Bible is chock full of prophecies about it, and that's exactly right. We never can, we're turned our way back from God, and that's why we're having these problems as we're having at this day and time.
And I'm not saying God's going to call everybody into the true church of God and everybody's going to know the Bible thoroughly, but we need some level of spiritual, biblical awakening. They actually did have one, hope I get these dates right, around 1750 and in the 1890s, and then a few decades after that, where they at least tried to be, and England had a big one, I can't remember the date, where they were going very decadent, and they kind of bounced them back up in a more moral direction. We need a moral and a pro-family awakening in this country. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I don't know. But you know what?
I don't think it's going to happen.
But I don't know if it'd be what we would expect. I expect some kind of a odd swing to the right, but it won't be the far. It won't be the.
Yes.
It won't be the right we want. It'll be a far right, and it'll swing, but it'll be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, I have a feeling that, see, the devil is very clever. He beats you up with his left hand, then when you're not looking, he hits you with, knocks you out with the right. He's going to, now I'm speculating, I have no, the details are vague. A false prophet, maybe a super pope or whatever title he eventually gets, is going to come along and ask for a spiritual awakening for Western Europe, maybe all Western culture. It won't really be the kind of thing that it should be, or the kind of thing like it was in 1750. It'll be, I can't exactly put my name on it. It'll be obeying the new religious order, but it won't really be a godly religious order. It will appear to be godly.
And
and it will be bad in a different kind of bad.
I've been kind of contemplating what would cause, because there's such a great divide right now in this country. What would bring this country and the world together? And there's only one thing right now, the way things are, that I could see could possibly do that, and that's the super rich that are manipulating everything are kind of equally hated by both sides. So that's a possibility that somebody could come along, go after them, maybe a super pope or the beast, go after these super rich people that are manipulating both sides. Maybe the world finally figures out what's going on with this vaccine. Somebody comes along and says, hey, I'll take care of it. And they somehow tear down the people or the organizations that did it. And then people form up behind that power. I could see that sometime as possibly being a way to get both of the sides that just hate each other right now to get on the same page again.
And the guy could be, I'm a religious uniter. I'm going to unite everybody and all the religions, or as much as that can be done. And it will look good, but deep down, it won't be good. I mean, there was a time when the people in Germany thought Hitler was I think he got the Nobel Peace Prize, or at least he was up there somewhere, nominated for it in 1939. Great peacemaker. I know that all sounds funny now, but I'm telling you, maybe this great religious leader can come and then he'll introduce us to the great political leader. Obviously, I'm not saying anything like that's going to happen soon, but someday, like Ken said it very well, it could happen. But what America needs now is more humble, open-minded people willing to listen to the Bible. Would you read that Isaiah scripture and the Proverbs scripture, please, Ken?
But this is the man to whom I will look. He that is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Then Proverbs is, give heed to my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my thoughts to you. I will make my words known to you.
Now, here's what I believe as far as truth is concerned. If you're humble and honor and respect God's word, and then when you learn something God wants you to learn, you try your best to follow, then God will make more truth known to you. That's the trick. And if you resist the truth, like a lot of false prophets did, God can, like you said, can cement them into error, or let the demons cement them into error. But if you're humble and you say, okay, if that's true, I'm going to try to obey it, then God will let you understand more and more truth.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm just going to throw a question out there. I may have missed it, but in the last year, the leader that was elected, has he called for a national day of prayer?
I'm not aware of it. I'll put it that way. There was
I think
it has one.
Yeah, I'm thinking that everyone before that has. Now, does that show you, is he humble? Because leader of the free world is he humble enough to ask for a national day of prayer?
Everybody thought Biden was just a gentle old man and all that. And I guess he had that image because the media gave it to him. But when reporters ask him a challenging question, he gets very few of those. But when he gets one, even halfway challenging, he gets kind of mad and snarky. Anybody notice that?
Oh, yeah.
He said he'd fire anybody that did that when he was running for president because he was running on the fact that Trump was mean. He said he would fire anybody that would do something, which is exactly what he did. So he should fire himself then.
We don't want that.
The alternative is equally as
we don't want
as
that
depressing.
to happen. Yes. Yes.
Let's read Isaiah 9. Isaiah 6. This is another enigmatic scripture.
And he said, "Go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their eyes and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return to be healed."
And by the way, this scripture was quoted by Jesus Christ. I want to just read Christ's quotation in Matthew 13, and let's discuss it for a minute, please, Ken.
"And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear, and shall not understand, and seeing you will see, and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull, their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed."
And the question, I might just ask both Kens this question, see what you think. What percentage of Americans really want to hear the truth? I mean, I know it's hard to know, and people will always say, of course I'm open to the truth. But what percentage do you think really open to the truth? And could it be less than 50%?
It could be, but I think there are possibly still more that do that don't. Maybe
60-40.
I guess I differ. I guess I just say 10%.
No, I think
10% really want to hear the truth.
Well, it depends on what truth you're talking about. I mean, truth on everything, or just the things?
Truth of God.
If you're talking truth about everything, then it's going to get smaller and smaller when that truth runs up against their narrative, no matter what side you're on.
Right.
Yeah, there's convenient truth, things that they don't mind hearing, and other things.
Yeah, it varies by topic. If you're talking political truth, then maybe more than not. If you're talking religious truth, none. I mean, you're very, very few.
I've heard two people have hung up on me on the phone about a political truth, and I didn't say anything all that. I just said, well, this means that you don't believe black people are smart enough to get ID. Click! The phone hung up on me. It was a liberal. I won't tell you what the other one was. I don't want to embarrass anybody. But and when I say they don't want to hear it, I mean they do want to hear it. But on things like COVID, maybe they are willing to hear it.
Yeah, they're getting to. More and more are starting to want to hear it. They're turning on that one topic.
It used to be they believed any kind of mask was really working. I'm getting the feeling more and more of them realize cheap cloth masks are worthless, and even the higher quality ones maybe only get 10%. Well, they probably don't know that yet, but I think they're falling. The cheap masks are losing their appeal.
Even Ken says it. Even on the box, it says they don't work for those 95s. None of this stuff is made to stop a virus. It's only made to stop bacteria. Bacteria are huge compared to a virus. Viruses are infinitesimally small, but bacteria, like those masks they put on for surgical masks, those aren't designed to keep viruses out. I mean, they're not sealed on the side. I mean, it's a joke. They've got wrinkles in them, and they're only designed to keep bacteria from your mouth getting into the patient's opened wound. That's science, and people are too stupid to figure that out. I'm sorry, but it's just that's the way it is.
By the way,
I was listening to Eric Erickson today on the radio, and I just caught a segment of it. But what he said really seemed to make sense to me. He said the reason why this COVID thing hasn't went away is because the medical people have now gotten such a big ego from being on TV and showing that they know so much about this, and that anybody that, just what we see every day, somebody has anything to say about it, they put it down. He says, and he was talking about Fauci dude has pictures of himself hanging in his office and a bobblehead on his desk of himself.
He's not a narcissist.
And he's saying, no, seriously. I mean, and so, but what he was saying, what he was driving, he was making humor about it, but what he was driving at made a lot of sense to me, that these guys have gone so far into this that they're not willing to give it up. They want to keep it around as long as they can because they love to see themselves.
These leftists never, ever, ever give up the con. Ever. They never turn on each other. They never have a deathbed confession. Never do they turn. They must have some secret pact with a secret handshake or something where they never, ever, ever give up the con.
Isn't that scary? Isn't that scary? You could argue that gaslighting does work on a lot of people.
Yeah.
I heard our president say he overperformed this year. You don't believe me?
No, I heard it. I about died when I heard him say that. He overperformed. Everything is on fire and burning and falling apart. And I ordered a truck. A month ago. Now I find out Ford don't have any steering wheels, airbags, or chips. I ain't getting my truck. And when you don't have when you can't sell cars, well, it just everything. I mean, if you're can't sell cars anymore, the whole country's going to grind to a halt. What are you going to do? No new vehicles. What are you going to do?
When I look at Buttigieg,
by design, they want their electric vehicles.
You can't get any vehicles, electric or otherwise, right now.
Yeah.
Secretary.
Oh, you can buy it. I bought a used truck for an enormous price.
Yeah, all the used cars are twice what they're worth.
Yeah, it was an enormous price for a used truck. I mean, I wasn't expecting to pay that much for it, but what do you do when you got to have something?
Used trucks cost as much as new ones, right?
I ordered one. I want it.
Yeah.
If they give it to me, I'll be happy to buy it. But I don't know. They someone that works in one of the factories told me they shut them down, and they sent everybody home. Everybody's laid off, and they don't have parts. Forget it. You're done.
Oh, here's a scary thought. If China takes Taiwan in the next 4 or 5 months, or if they bully Taiwan into surrendering, which I'm sure they'd prefer that than a fight. The same with Russia and Ukraine. But if they do, over half the chips we use in America are made in Taiwan.
I know.
Then China will control almost all the chips American, and that's used in so many industries. Think of how dependent we'll be. And our government isn't even doing anything to prepare for it. I mean, if I say this, I know I sound partisan, I am. I think the people in the administration are incompetent.
Like I said, China pays Biden more than we do. Why would he do anything to help America? 10% for the big guy.
You're going to get us kicked off.
Well, they do.
Get us kicked off, Ken.
10% for the big guy.
Well, at any rate, let's go back to Isaiah 29:13. Same topic, though. People loving the truth and that sort of thing.
Okay, Isaiah. Therefore the Lord said, inasmuch as these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but have removed their hearts far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the commandment of men. Therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work among this people, a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hidden.
In other words, the wisest people, their information won't get to the public, and your so-called wise men in key positions will become foolish. Does that sound
we got
familiar
Joe
to you,
Biden,
Ken?
the man with the worst foreign policy record on the face of the earth, is running the country.
It makes, and then you take someone like Victor David Hanson. I think he's pretty wise. You can find him, but only on a few conservative places, which are marginalized. The mainstream, I don't believe the mainstream would dare interview him, or Candace Owens, or Dennis Prager, the real people that have some wisdom. Does that make sense? They wouldn't touch those people at a 10-foot pole.
Counter to the narrative. No. Only the narrative is allowed to escape.
All I can say is, unless America becomes spiritually better, it is probable that God is going to allow this to continue. Now, maybe God's going to intervene and restrain the spirit world, and we'll start hearing truth and goodness and wisdom.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet money
on it. But I'm praying for it, but I wouldn't hold my breath either. You don't get the feeling that America is becoming more Bible-friendly, family-friendly, do you? I hear stories where public schools have clubs where the teachers find kids are a little lonely, a little whatever, and they start recruiting them for gender dysphoria and all kinds of things that aren't good for those kids.
There was I just heard today there's a man suing a school district because his daughter has tried to commit suicide twice, because unbeknownst to him, the school has insisted that his daughter should be a boy. She's 12. And when she's at school, they make her take a male name, a man's name, a boy's name, and they're putting this poor girl through, murder. And she tried to commit suicide twice. And they told her to keep it from her dad. He found out about it. Now he's suing him. I hope he just devastates him.
Yeah.
I wish I could trust the judges. But the judges of this world, I don't trust them, but I hope he does devastate them. All I can say is, if I had my way, which at this point I don't, but I would take all the kids, grandkids in my family and others, and homeschool them or put them in private schools. And only private schools I approve. Public education is becoming poisonous. That's why I don't see America swinging back to a more pro-Bible, pro-family direction, because they're undermining our younger generation effectively.
Yeah, it's very few kids nowadays. Well, I was talking with my daughter the other day, and I knew something we were talking about. Something that they broke up is what it was, and she said, "Well, how did you know?" And I said, "Well, when he called me." And, he's your age, which is about 30, maybe 32. And I said, he's your age. I said, the guy got on the phone with me, and all he did was sir this and sir that and sir this. And I said, people your age don't talk like that to people anymore. There's very few. So I said, I already knew the guy wasn't on the up and up when he first thing, how you doing, sir? I said, yeah, okay, I understand where you're coming from. So from then on, that conversation didn't go very well on my part and in my estimation, and I knew it wouldn't. And she was asking me how I knew that was going to happen. I told her, I said, that's it. I said, there's little clues in way people talk to people nowadays, and that I knew he was throwing me a snow job, I guess. And I said, okay, but it's hard. People don't see the clues. They don't see the signs that's coming. And If you pay attention to what we're reading and what we just read and what we're about to read, you're going to see that yeah, there are demons in this world and they can take over very easily.
Ken, could you skip to Matthew 13:16? Because now we're gonna look at the antidote. How do you get yourself so that the demonic flow of the world doesn't blind you, or whatever you want to call it, the direction the world is
All
being
right.
pushed?
But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. Therefore, hear the parable of the sower.
And when you hear that parable, it just says he compares minds to soil. If your mind is humble, moist, and ready and open, God will give you truth. But in several cases, that's not the case. The truth is easily snuffed out. So what we need to do is try to stay humble and open-minded and be thankful that God has opened our mind. We see a lot of things that a lot of people just don't want to see, can't see, and are being led astray. And obviously they don't know they're being led astray. They laugh at you. So what do you mean I'm being led astray? And by the way, we now have some countries where the government has to approve church doctrines. They have several doctrines that are on the government's bad list. Scriptures that cannot be preached, or you could go to jail. I mean, several Western countries, and it will probably get worse. In other words, the government is going to start mandating your religious thinking. That is scary. This is starting to happen in the Western world. Let's go to 1 Timothy 4:1, please, Ken.
Now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth.
So, in other words, evil spirits are messing with churches and I guess whispering in the ears of church leaders and scholars and inserting false doctrines. And there's some clever ones too. The rapture, I think, is one of the most clever. And some girl in Scotland was in some cave or something, and then she dreamed it up, and others cleaned it up and gave it more of an academic spin later. But that is a very clever doctrine. Kind of overshadows the resurrection. And, some parts of it don't make sense, but they don't worry about that. Can you think of other doctrines of the world that I think probably come from bad sources? Any
Food
thoughts?
loss.
What?
Food loss.
Oh, yeah.
Clean and unclean foods. You can't even go to a store nowadays and find beef bacon. They're taking it off the shelves. I used to find beef sausage. You can't buy beef sausage anymore. The price of beef out the door. You're not going to be able to eat beef. I watched Water's World tonight, and they were eating alligator on live TV. And seriously. So they're taking away the food and making you eat unclean food because that's what people are going to have to eat. I guess some of us are going to be vegans.
Oh, by the way, I saw it in a Disney cartoon movie, but I knew they meant it. Wasn't joking. A lot of the vegans say we need to eat bugs.
Oh, wow. That's been going on for 10 years. Yeah, they've been doing that for quite a while. It's another thing the liberal elites want to make us do. They'll eat their steak, but they want us peasants to eat bugs. It's a great source of protein. There's all kinds of pro-bug stuff out there, and they're feeding, not literally the bugs, but they're feeding this information to our children too, trying to bring them up to think that eating bugs is okay. Now, you can eat your bugs, I'll keep my steak.
Because cows have too much flatulence. Can you believe this? It is almost. It would be a joke if it weren't.
Yeah, and
so
you're
real.
trying to take beef and stuff out of the mouths of people and replace it with bugs. You're telling me there's not some spiritual satanic trash behind that mess? Come on, people.
Yeah.
By the way, I can't remember all the nitric oxide. I can't remember all the chemical details, but to be healthy, you need a certain amount of meat protein. I'm not saying that there aren't ways to get around it, but you got to be real careful or you might not do it right. It actually does not make you healthy to get rid of all meat from your diet, unless you really are careful about some other things. In other words, man was made to have a certain amount of protein, and meat gives you protein with a bunch of other stuff in it. And I know there's a lot of good arguments for being a vegetarian. And I guess we do need to eat more vegetables. I'll concede that, and fruit. And I'm trying to eat more vegetables too. But I think some of those doctrines about anti-meat are pagan in origin. And so we need to be careful, or only fish on Friday.
Well, think about it. The demonic world wants to bring us down low. How much lower is it than getting us to eat bugs? While feeding the elites all the best food on the planet.
And by the way, the elites, Glenn Beck put that in one of his books. The peasants would do horrible things, horrible life, but the elites lived in mansions hidden out in the country. Was in mansions. They had, meat and all kinds of good stuff. You still hear stories of elites having giant parties, and they're all unmasked, eating all kinds of steaks. The servants were all masked up. Something about that doesn't look right, does it? I mean, if the virus is in the air and all the elites are breathing the air, why can't the servants breathe the air too?
They got special air. They got special something.
I never thought of that.
Their air is taxed. That's what it is. They pay a tax on their air, so it's perfectly clean.
Our final scripture. Can we go to 2 Timothy 4:3? I'm going to have to pass over one.
All right. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears. They will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables.
Now, that's a prediction. Obviously, it happened in Paul's day, but apparently the way it's written up, we're going to get more of that as we get toward the end time. And you read also 2 Timothy 4:3 as well, other verses. So that means the truth is going to be, even in religion, is going to be harder to hold.
I think a lot of this is talking to the churches specifically. So it's not necessarily going from the nominal Christian world. He's warning us in the church to not succumb to this stuff more so than there's no hope for these other people. They've already gone past it. He's warning the people in his church that he's called out of this world not to become part of this mess.
Yeah.
Because the Catholic Church, none of them, they don't do anything. They don't abide by his rules. When Christ said, "Who is my brother and my mother?" The ones who do the will of my Father, they don't do the will of his Father. So he's not talking to them. And that's what these verses are. They're talking to us. We got to be on our guard not to let this stuff grab us into this mess that Satan's trying to drag the whole world into.
And when you read some new doctrines from somebody who comes along, the burden of proof is on the person who brings you new truth and new ideas. And you got, and don't jump too quick. And there are some arguments like the rapture that look good at first until you look into them real careful. And the way that I heard one, it was very cleverly said. He says, well, what happens is your spirit goes to God as soon as you die, and it's up there, but your body is rotting in the ground. And then all of a sudden, so you're in, the real you is up in heaven. All the bad things happen to those stupid people on earth who aren't good Southern Baptists, whatever the deal is, and they're suffering. Watching up there, so, wait, not watching them get it on the edge of the cloud. And then when Christ comes back, your raptured mind goes down to your resurrected body and they're put together again. And I'm thinking, well, why would you bother with that? But also that gets them away from all the bad things that are going to happen to all the Christians, which would include some great martyrs too, but that's another story. But it sounds good, doesn't it?
I guess it never made much sense to me.
Well, that what's the name of this show? Line upon line. Always do that. If you have something that confuses you, go line upon line through the Bible. If you're called to the truth, it'll show up to you.
There's one prophetic thing going on this week. Obviously, it'll have twists and turns the next couple of weeks, but NATO, actually, apparently it's two separate things. Europe is not following Biden's leadership. That is no great surprise. Our media won't tell you that, but that's not. But some NATO countries want to put some really tough sanctions on the Russians. But the biggest European NATO member, Germany, is blocking them. And the question is, why is Germany blocking serious
Because they get their oil from them. That's how they get their oil from them. And who did that? That was Biden did
and natural
that.
Gas.
Biden did that.
Yeah. And he didn't get any concession from the Russians. And someone said, well, that Nord Stream pipeline, you could still cut it off. Don't buy anything from it, even if it's there. The Germans put a niche on that. They do not want the pipeline, any of that stuff, even being considered. That's the Germans as a sanction against Russia. Now, think about it. Half of the Russian economy is selling oil and natural gas. And maybe more than half, actually, get down to it. Well, also, this Nord Stream pipeline allows Russia to, if they get it going and things are working well, maybe that will go soon, it allows them to cut off the pipeline from Russia selling oil and natural gas to Ukraine. They can't cut it off now because it goes through Ukraine into the rest of Europe. But if they now have another route through Germany, Russia could also cut off Ukraine's in the future, in the middle of the winter, their oil and natural gas. You see how all this works? So people are saying, well, why is Germany doing this?
Because they want their oil.
Is it just the money? They're going to make
Right.
money off because they're going to mark it up as they distribute it to Europe. Is it just for the money?
Money and power.
I actually think it is money and power, but I have a feeling the Germans don't really like Britain and America.
No kidding.
And they are, it's not so clear cut. You could put it in easy words that they'd admit. But they see their natural interests as being different. NATO is an American-led institution. They don't want NATO leading anywhere. They want the EU, which is led by Germany, to be running things. I mean, I can sense it. I can't say I've got any proof of it.
They
I just
could use
feel
that
it, don't
to
you?
push out NATO and replace it. They could use that pipeline and that power to push out NATO and replace it with their own conglomeration, which is currently the EU, which will end up probably in part, in some form or another, will reform into that beast power.
Yes, the Holy Roman Empire at some point. There are a lot of possibilities too. I read one where if Biden stupidly makes a bad deal with Russia, which he probably, looking at the I'm trying to think of the word for the let's just say, the incompetence of his administration. If they do the wrong thing, they could, with Germany's help, they could undermine NATO for good. NATO members say, well, why bother? It's possible this could be the end of NATO next year, too. Biden screws it up. Obviously, they're mad about the Afghan thing. He left his NATO allies desperate in Afghan, and for 2 days wouldn't talk to anybody, which is the craziest thing. At a crisis, you go hiding, and your news reporter takes a vacation. Never heard of such a thing. But anyway, I think Germany has a separate path. We Americans aren't smart enough to see it, but I sense it. Also, there's another perspective, too. From Germany's point of view, they've made buddy-buddy with France. They and France are like this now. If they make a deal with the Russians, can you see how, from the German history, that makes Germany more secure?
Yeah.
Now, I know you're going to say yes, but, and there are a lot of yes, buts. So I'm not saying I got know all, but I just feel we can't trust Germany. They needed us in the past, so they kind of went along with it. We had reasonable leadership and a lot of power. They sensed the weakness. And generally, you have wars when you have
when you have
like
the most powerful country in the world that's typically played police, and now is weaker than it's ever been. Leadership has had the weakest leadership since Carter, at least. Then yeah, in fact, it's probably much weaker. And right now, the world is more volatile. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of countries decide to make a move like Russia and China and maybe North Korea, Iran, obviously.
Iran. And Germany in a kind of a sneaky kind of way. And I also think our Pentagon has such bad leadership that I don't think, I mean, we have some units that are very, battle ready, but I don't think America right away, I mean, in short notice, could put like 300,000 heavily mechanized armored soldiers in the field anywhere in the world. I think our military has been politicized into a whole lot of
and I know
pettiness.
a lot of good people are retiring. They're getting out.
Some are being forced out because of the jab. And so if the world senses America's military is getting weaker and we're more, and I love women too, but a more feminized military, is that really
And
a
you
good
know
signal
what?
to
If they're
send?
worried that we're going to vote back in a strong leader, they will take advantage before that happens. So we've got 3 years that we got to watch for this. And I mean, especially if the the Republicans take back the House and Senate, it'll be a stalemate. So I don't know. It's gonna be it's next 3 years is gonna be real interesting if you play it out.
Yeah. Now I could be totally wrong. Germany may be very logical why they're not cooperating, but I'm very suspicious. And I think this is a disaster for the world. And any reordering of things favors vast changes. And that's not good because who's behind a lot of that. The bad spiritual forces. Now, if I'm wrong and Biden makes brilliant decisions, everything works perfectly, and the Germans fall in line.
You said Biden makes brilliant decisions.
We're starting off at the beginning
and you did
of
it with
the show.
A straight face.
I was thinking that sounds like the first part of the show.
You had a
with
couple
the jokes.
more you were gonna roll out.
That must have been one of them.
Yeah, it was.
And if anybody vehemently disagrees with me, and you think that things are going to go wonderful for America in the next 6, 7, 8, 10 months because of our wonderful Secretary of State and our fabulous Secretary of Transportation and Biden's genius on the world stage, feel free to email us again.
That's right.
That'll help. Um, well, I want to thank everyone. You had something you wanted to mention. You had a couple of women.
Yeah,
that,
you want to mention prayers.
I want to mention, pray for two of the stalwarts of the St. Louis church. Mary Wright, she is dying. Well, let's just say cancer is in a lot of her body parts the doctors can't get to. Chemo won't work. They think the cancer is in the lymph nodes, very bad. Her sister Rachel has cancer of the colon. She's almost 81. She's having an operation February 2nd. And I'm assuming the operation has to succeed or the cancer will get her. So pray for her success in the operation. She has only one lung, so this is not easy for her. And that's Rachel Ledbetter. And and just pray for everybody in the church that we come through all these things in good shape.
All right. I want to thank
One more thing. Pray for Rita Gooch. I mean, she's not dying or anything, but the doctors are still trying to find the right diagnosis for why her immune system seems to be scratching up her eyes.
That is bizarre. I've never heard of that.
Maybe it's more than that, but they haven't figured it out as far as we know.
So we should pray that the doctors are,
diagnose it, or God makes a miracle. A little of both. I don't care. Whatever God wants to do.
Understood. Well, I want to thank everyone. We had a very good turnout tonight. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And remember, everyone, if you have a question you want to answer during the program, type it out and I'll present it and we'll try to do our best to answer it for you. And if you have show topics you want to hear, you just email lineuponline2810@gmail.com. So Line Upon Line, or you go to the LULICG website and you can find the email there, or just contact me on Facebook if you have me on Facebook, and I'll be more than happy to pass it along. So, good night, everyone. I hope to see you again back here next week. Stay warm, because it's cold here. It's cold here.
It's cold.
Stay warm, and we'll see you back next week, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Ken. Both.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.